Hello, all you bright and glorious people out there in the interwebs. Welcome to another episode of Perfect Fair Day. My name is George Merchant, and this is.
Jeremiah Evans.
And today we are going to talk about AI and what it is, what it isn't, the good, the bad, the beautiful, the ugly, the funny, the not so funny, etc., etc. We hear a lot of people talk about AI, a lot of people commenting on AI, a lot of people giving their own 2 cents about things, and we're going to kind of jump in there with the mix and a couple extra idiots in the conversation. Doesn't hurt things none. So we're going to jump in there and say how we see it. Both of us have programmed pretty much starting before, even prior to our entire adult lives. Jeremiah and I here were in a computer challenge together in high school. If we want to go way back, take the Wayback Machine, and we actually had access to a supercomputer, Sandia National Laboratories in New Mexico. We had access to it, and we could, put different programs on there and run them.
Yeah, and now this, fitness tracker, has more power than. No, I don't think so. Still,
I don't think it's as strong as that computer was even back then, but. We kind of wanted to give it our perspective, inform some people maybe that aren't so informed what it is and what it isn't. There's a lot of people using the term AI really, really broadly and across different spectrum of things. And it really is a broad term because there's a lot of things that fall under it. And so we kind of wanted to maybe start off this episode with maybe a little bit of funny stories about technology and everything, and you guys may have some of your own funny stories. Leave some comments. That'd be great. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Share it around if you will. If you like a couple knuckleheads talking about a bunch of other stuff, and we do certainly appreciate you tuning in. So Reader's Digest had this really funny story right here about facial recognition. This is a form of AI, so facial recognition can also prove confusing. 2 years ago, Amazon's vaunted facial recognition software matched 28 members of Congress to mugshots of criminals. Oops. Yeah, where I think it made the mistake was it didn't match all of them to mugshots as criminals because they're all a bunch of criminals. But not to get too political or anything, but and that's just one of the really funny stories that go. And if you've got a Roomba and a small puppy, then you know what a Roomba, how it can just do its job and not really care. And then you've got AI turning the inside of your decor into a Jackson Pollock painting in one tone. So you got a poopocalypse or whatever, the poopening going on in your house, just spreading it from corner to corner. So I think we've all kind of maybe heard some of these funny different things that have happened, and with technology and Alexa ordering a bunch of stuff or just playing music at maximum volume for whatever reason it decided to do it for, or a kid mentioning something and you get $100,000 worth of groceries delivered to your house. So there's good and there's bad of it, but we wanted to help kind of define it if we can even truly define what AI is and everything.
Well, I mean, it's pretty obvious that the AI is Skynet and Terminator. And
that's right. I mean, that's
and
what
everything Hollywood says.
That's what Hollywood says.
I believe.
I mean, you gotta believe.
I believe in all of the fantasy.
Yes, I mean you
got.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, guns with silencers go pew 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 in the movies. They must do that in real life. I mean, they're just completely accurate.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can flip my car over 5 times and still
walk away.
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
Not a scratch on you. But so we wanted to take joking aside, we did want to take a little bit of time to go through what artificial intelligence is and what it isn't. We hear a lot of people, some very intelligent people actually, and they have like these different fears, and a lot of them are unfounded fears. A lot of them are just kind of off there in left field, and I'm like, no, that's not how it works. That's not how things are plugged together and stuff. So let's just take a little bit of time to go through it. Now, even the internet surprise, surprise, can't really clearly define AI. So I just Googled the term AI, right? So if you look right here, if you take a look, all I typed into Google was just AI. Okay, that's it, just AI, and I get ability of a computer or robot controlled by a computer to do tasks that are usually done by humans because they require humans' intelligence and discernment. That's an okay, that's an okay
it might
definition.
be considered a use of AI.
And yeah, exactly. It's a use of AI, really. And then you kind of scroll down and you see like Wikipedia's intelligence demonstrated by machines as opposed to the natural intelligence displayed by animals or humans, right? And if you keep going down by the things, it's down here. The simulation of human intelligence processes by machines, especially computer systems. I like this one better. A wide-ranging branch. This is probably the best definition, in my opinion. A wide-ranging branch of computer science concerned with building smart machines capable of performing tasks that typically, and I'm sure that goes on to say, performed by humans. So, and this to me is probably the best definition of it. It's automation is what it is. It's software automation that helps you perform different tasks. Now, coming from the manufacturing side of things, is what we work in on heavy industrial stuff. You hear people concerned about the robots are going to take over and they're gonna self-replicate and destroy us all and everything like that. And artificial intelligence.
We're not quite there yet.
Well, we're probably not going to be anywhere close to that in our lifetime. So I think you might want to just set that fear aside. Not to say there's not concerns about AI, but
people look at Boston Dynamics and think the Terminator, but they're still not there.
Exactly.
Nothing a water hose or like a mud mode or I don't know, half a dozen other like deterrents wouldn't.
Exactly.
Now drones on the other hand.
Drones are a little bit scary. I'm not gonna lie, drones are a little bit scary, but there's usually a human operator on the other side of that. But I imagine that you could give it machine intelligence and allow it to pick targets and stuff like that, and that would be that right there. I feel strongly against. I don't think that's a good use of AI, but I don't think that AI should be doing threat assessment or criminal assessment at all. I think that's immoral. I think it's very, very wrong to do something like that. I think you need good discernment and in a lot of cases for that. But I don't want to get too far down the dark end of this quite yet. But there's a lot that AI can do. But in manufacturing, what we mostly use it for is called vision systems. And some of the other people in manufacturing may be familiar with the term vision systems. And vision systems typically are just systems that take pictures of things at very, very high speeds and determine what to do with it. Okay, so typically it's for error checking. So you're making a bunch of parts, and the vision system is sitting there, and a lot of times there's actually a strobe light with it, and it's just going really, really fast, and it's quickly taking pictures and then saying good part, good part, good part, bad part, and a bad part might get blown off or kicked off a reject gate or something like that, and then go down and get recycled or tossed out or whatever they do with it, and usually recycled. And they could check for color, shape, any kind of oddity. Obviously, you can incorporate scale systems where it's weights involved and stuff, and all that is just really, really rapid decision making processes that faster than even a human could do, and faster than a human eye and mind could discern that. But it's a very simplistic process, and it takes people to set that up. It takes people to train it, because you have to train it to your product, and you have to say, okay, this is a good part, this is a good part, this is a good part, and then you got to give it on purpose, give it a bad part, and then sometimes it'll still even let some bad ones by because it's not been told that that's a bad one. It doesn't fit that quite yet. And then what typically in manufacturing will do is they'll take that bad part, hopefully before it gets to the customer, but sometimes makes it to the customer, and they'll feed that back through and say, this is bad part. And that's machine learning coupled with a vision system. You're training it, and it makes a process really quickly. That's about the extent of AI used in manufacturing.
Yeah.
Okay. That's about the full extent of it in manufacturing, because most machines are what we call air gapped. There's no connection to the internet because they don't want a connection to the internet, Why would you want a connection to the internet and a manufacturing line? There's no need for it. You don't want somebody hacking it from the outside. You don't want, well, not even just hacking. I've run into problems on networking issues where they had things connected to the internet in a major manufacturing line that a Windows update would crash the line once a week at the same exact time when they rolled out their update.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's stuff like that, and it's not as bad as you think. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Like from a programming background, like the fundamentals of AI aren't anything magical. You got inputs, like what you want to feed it, what you want to know from it.
Mm-hmm.
You got, the processing of it, and then you got outputs. And AI is, I don't know why people ever compare them to the human brain, because that's like, and I am so tired of like different places I read that say our brains work in binary. They don't.
They don't work.
Not even remotely. I mean, I'm not a neuroscientist, but it doesn't take a whole lot of like just basic research to understand that our brains are more analog.
Yeah. Yeah, we think on a range, and we think in multiple dimensions.
Yeah, so in a sense, I guess they try to map it out, as that's what we're doing, and I do think that AIs might be the answer for. Well, I don't know, like Musk's, brain stuff. I'm sure he uses some AI, but basically they're just really good at processing big data sets.
That's what they're good at.
And if our brains could like retain and process like big data sets, I guarantee you they would like beat out the best AI.
Oh, yeah.
But we're just not. Our brains aren't set up to take the knowledge of all mankind together and come to a conclusion. But on the flip side, I don't think anybody's like come close to making an AI that can learn how we do and surmise stuff from the world without basically being taught everything first.
Yeah.
I mean, we are taught and we learn as we grow, but we can learn. We can come to truths without actually ever being told them. Like come to logical conclusions that work within our reality, and a computer's not going to be able to do that unless like it's able to pull from somewhere.
To back up what you're saying, the discernment outside to the data set, right? So one of the things that like the self-driving vehicles and stuff have faced, it's a really great example, is that they can only work within the data sets that they have. Well, if you have something that's outside and see in the real world, you have like an infinite amount of possibilities and variables that can happen. So especially when you're talking about driving down the road and stuff, but you expand beyond that and it gets just infinitesimally bigger. AI is good at like taking a look at something and saying, okay, quickly, this is this situation, this is what I should do in this situation because this is what all my data sets say. This is the thing.
Yeah, but it's very good at making a logical decision.
Yeah,
that's
quickly.
Something I wanted to branch into, and you might touch on is
and it's good.
We make a lot of our decisions based on emotions in the moment, or like
morality,
aggression, fight or flight, and that and a computer's just not going to necessarily make a choice like that.
No. So if you got to think about it this way: you're driving down the road, and you say you're in your brand new self-driving pickup truck now, or whatever it is, and you're a good moral person, and you've been raised to respect the elderly, respect the sanctity of life, and you think in those terms, and a small child runs out in front of your vehicle, and the only way to really avoid it is to take a very dangerous hard turn off the road, possibly into a concrete barrier, and just you're making a split second sort of moral choice, whatever. I'm not going to hit this child, but the AI going to be willing to put your life in danger?
Yeah, what's the ethical choice?
Yeah, exactly. You may absolutely say, you may not, but But I think a lot of people would say, hey, I'll wreck my car. It's just a car. I don't care if it's a $100,000 car. I'll wreck my vehicle so that it doesn't take the life of a child. I'll put myself in danger to save the life of this child. And you're presented with this ethical sort of dilemma when you hand the control over to AI. So in cases like that, right? So the outside emotional, moral, sort of obligations, we make a lot of decisions that are outside just logical choices. And that's a good thing, because if we were purely logical like AI, they're going to constantly, and you put this AI in charge of more and more things, which I do believe they will become charged more and more things, and we'll go over that a little bit more. They end up You end up giving them the ability to make wholly immoral decisions, and you washing your hands of it, saying, well, the AI chose to do that. And I think that's a very dark path. So I think there is danger in it. I think that there's also good in it. Okay, I think there's very, very good in it, and there's some really neat things that AI can do.
Yeah.
Let me show you something real quick. This is actually really pretty too. This is it. So this is a different version of AI. This is the first Dolly 1 and Dolly 2. These are
text to image.
Yeah.
Well, you can.
So somebody typed in a painting of a fox sitting in a field at sunrise in the style of Claude Monet. So same text, version 1 of the software, version 2 of the AI software, right? So obviously you could say different. I think they're both great paintings, actually. I think they're both actually pretty neat.
Yeah.
But when you take a look at that, you're like, oh man, that's actually really pretty, and that's kind of neat, and maybe I could kind of come up with some of my own stuff, and
yeah, a lot of people have been playing with the mini dolly lately. I see a lot of people on social networks and that. It's a subset of this, so I think Dolly 1 uses like 12 billion like subsets or something like that, and Dolly 2, I don't know. I've seen some amazing stuff out of it.
It's growing.
It's insane amount of the parameters. That's kind of some stuff we're going to touch on, but I want to talk about like how AI like outputs stuff a little bit. So in computer programming, you kind of can have like 3 different possible outputs with stuff depending on what you need them for. And it's deterministic would be your first one, where you pretty much always want the same results, like what a scientist wants. Like you're gonna always want to try to get the same results. Well, depending, I guess, on the science you're doing, but 1 + 1 you hope always equals 2.
Yeah.
And then you have stochastic, which is just kind of completely random. Give me a number 1 to 10.
It just random.
And I mean, you use that for stuff. Like you can actually introduce like raster into image to make it less blocky or that. So there is use for that, because people would be like, why would you ever want to program for randomness? And then probabilistic is statistical. So AI, that's where AI is, making a lot of its decisions. It's like percentages of like what it thinks is right. But it actually uses a bit of stochastic too, like some randomness, because if you use the mini dolly, maybe we'll leave a link to it in our comments. You could put the same text string in and keep hitting refresh, and it'll give you different pictures every time. So it's obviously got some randomness going on in there, but
that's good. That's a good little breakdown of how programming, some of the basics of programming work in these fields. And try to pull back the curtain for people just a little bit on this. In most programming stuff, most automation, most things like that, you're actually not using stochastic or probabilistic programming.
Yeah, because you always want the same result.
Yeah, you always, when this happens, I want this to happen. When I hit the start button on my machine, I want these things to start up in this order every single time. And if it doesn't start up in this order, I want it to fault out and shut down because it's dangerous, or it's going to make a bunch of bad product or whatever, right?
Stochastic and probabilistic would be used more in signal processing, like analog signals,
and
image processing,
and in AI. Okay, and because when you're talking about probabilities and stuff, you start to get into this pattern recognition, which goes into facial recognition, which goes into cancer diagnostics, and that's really neat. Is that like AI is being used now to diagnose breast cancer, cancers in eyes, cancers in skins, and it's actually being it's more effective than their human counterpart, and it's because it has so many possible subsets to look at, so many parameters, okay, so many different parameters that it can take a look at. So it can process, you know, 10 million images of X-rays or mammograms taken at different stages of cancer growth in human females, and then go, oh, look at this, like this pattern always led to cancer, or almost always led to cancer. And then what it does is it can do a probabilistic thing and say, this pattern, I recognize this pattern as always, reaching a cancerous tumor stage
to a high degree.
To a higher degree of accuracy than a human being can. So it can recognize that stuff. It can do that with like on like moles and stuff on the skin for different patterns and stuff, and that's wonderful. You're not really taking the human element completely out of there. There still needs to be some human interaction, obviously, treatment, things like that. But the quicker you can diagnose something, diagnose cancers, diagnose different health issues, see a problem arising before it really hits you, the earlier that you can turn away from that, the better. It's in all medicine, the earlier you can diagnose something, the better it is. So there's definitely good side to probabilistic.
With any new technology, let's say like doctors, I would hope that if some framework like that. I mean, I don't know how much they're actually looking into it, but I would hope they would be able to set their pride aside and realize it's a tool they could use to.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, but on the flip side, the
software is not medically trained.
There is a negative side to AI. In the medical field. In a scenario like that, if we're able to diagnose like that, if you get the insurance company involved, they could potentially
right? Yeah. I hadn't really considered that.
Yeah,
I hadn't really considered that.
They could potentially look at that and be like, oh, well, we're gonna not cover this person anymore because they look like they're
precancerous.
Yeah,
probabilistically precancerous.
Yeah.
There you go, guys. There you go.
Kind of digging into maybe a darker side of AI.
Yeah.
That's not
before
Skynet,
Before we get
I'm jumping a little bit in there, but I just kind of wanted to.
Yeah, before we get too dark.
Get my toe in the water a little bit.
too dark in there real quick. So I want to give people an idea how fast this is changing. And so when we talk about the number of parameters, we're talking about the number of trainable parameters in this and how fast it is growing. Let me give you a little bit of chart for reference right here. Nice little visual chart for you right there. So when you take a look at this right here, you'll notice that these are different versions of software. So you got, and we'll just compare GPT-2 to 3 because they came up, they're coming from the same source, right? If you look, this is in billions, by the way, number of parameters per billion, right? So 175 billion trainable parameters in GPT-3 versus GPT-2. And GPT-2 was no slouch, okay? The amount of difference that it is now is enormous. So this area is growing very, very rapidly, and people are it's in its not completely in its infancy stage, because there's actually people that have been doing some stuff for a while. We'll get into that in a minute. But it's growing, and it's growing to be very, very powerful very, very quickly. So what does that mean when we talk about a technology? Now, I'm not against technological growth. I think that technological growth helps feed people around the world and makes farmland more productive. Now, it only, like where it used to take 70% of the population to feed us, it takes like 3% of the population now to feed us. That's important things to realize. That's important things that technology has allowed us to do a lot more, and allowed us to specialize a lot more, and allowed for efficiencies and increase in standard of living. We work on automation for a living. That's what it does. That's really what it does. And I'm not against technology, but I think that we need to be careful about the technology that we're using. When we talk about algorithms, I think that everybody probably understands to a good degree. There is, when you go and you do throw in a search term into Google or something like that, or DuckDuckGo for those people that want to really find something, you realize that that there's something in the background that's making the decision making for what it is that you're looking for, right?
And it's a lot of it is very similar to what we're talking about here.
Yep.
You know,
Yep. Very, very similar.
I mean, for the longest time, even back in the day when Google wasn't as horrible as it is now, given, you know, anything but ad results.
When they really meant do no evil.
It would tell you like a percentage, right? It'd be like the 93%, you know, close to what you were
searching for.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
And I don't
I
know.
remember those days.
Do they still do that?
Maybe.
I don't even pay attention to the
now.
score or the result, but I doubt it, because what do they do now? They sway it by ad revenue.
Mostly
in our field, we'll search a very particular term, and sometimes the first 5 or 6 results is trying to sell me something that has nothing to do with the part number I'm trying to get a manual for, to figure out how to set the thing up.
Yep. Or it is sometimes selling you the thing that you're looking for,
which is fine, but
you're trying to find the info on it. You're not trying to buy something.
I'll put in a brand new part sometimes, and it'll suggest some other thing because somebody, you know, the dollar sign, you know,
I'm going to go
equation.
I'm going to go a little bit, you know, warning, a little bit political on this too. Is that when I noticed that. And I see the manipulation. I think as a programmer, it's a lot easier to look at the manipulation and see it and understand what's going on. In the algorithms that you do when you put in the different search terms, I noticed that it started to change and that certain stories were highlighted and stories disappeared because I would read something. I was able to find this article 3 to 6 months prior or a year prior or whatever. I say, oh, that was a really good reference or whatever. And I'd say, hey, Jared, let me share this with you or whatever. I read this thing a while back, and I'd go in to look it up, and no matter what I did, I couldn't find it. And then I finally gave up because I got so frustrated. Then I started looking up stuff on like DuckDuckGo and alternate search engines, and I could find it. I could find it almost immediately. So it was obviously a manipulation, a political manipulation, in how they wanted a certain narrative to be propped up and another narrative to be pushed down. Whatever side that you're on, whether you agree with what they're doing or disagree with what you're doing, it's being done, right? And
I've heard the argument that it's just what more people are searching, and that's how the algorithm. But
that's not true.
That's really hard to.
That's not
hard
true.
to stomach when I'm looking for something that has nothing to do with
that's
a
not
particular topic, and it's like shoving stuff in my face, which has happened quite often lately, especially
and specific narrative.
You know, in the last few cycles, and I don't even want to look at it. I'm not all that political myself.
No. Jared here is my you know, less political. Like, I've known Jared my whole life, and he's been not a real political guy. He just he kind of stands up, speaks up for what he thinks is right and wrong, but you know, he doesn't like to really get into politics a whole lot. And we try to on the show here. But I'm much more interested. I've always really paid attention to politics and what it's doing. More for how it's affecting us, like how does this fix us, everything. I do not like the partisanship. I do not like the infighting. I do not like all this stuff. I do not like manipulation. I do not like message manipulation because it convinces people that they're right about something many times when they're not, or it simplifies a like a complex subject that should be looked at and thought out. And that's the whole, you know, when you go and legislators get together, they should argue these things out in full and in good faith and in truth to come to to create good law. And I think that instead what we have is just like narrative slinging, and it's all, and I don't like it when anybody does it. I don't care if it's the left or the right or whoever. I don't like narrative. I don't like just people repeating lines. And what we've noticed in the algorithms is that certain narratives get really pushed up over other narratives, and that bothers me, and that's part of it. Okay, so I am in full disclosure, I am a right-leaning libertarian type of person. Okay, I want to live and let live in a moral framework. I do not like the government's involvement in almost anything. except for what was kind of laid out in the founding documents. I think less law is better in general. Okay, that doesn't mean I'm not a purist, though. That doesn't mean that I don't want some structure and law for the betterment of mankind all the way around. Okay, I'm not a purist in the sense that I don't think that we shouldn't legislate at all or anything like that. And I think that around AI, I got the two sides of me arguing, saying, okay, there's this bad potential thing going, and at the same time, I don't want them to overregulate. I don't want them to be in there and picking their favorites as politicians tend to do, and rewarding their lackeys and punishing their political enemies. And I'm against that. I'm strongly against that. So I don't like there to be, anytime they write a law, I know that's going to go on. So it bothers me, but I'm not the only one that it bothers. See, let's talk about Elon Musk again. His name keeps coming up a lot, okay? Now, Elon Musk is a major investor in and uses AI, okay? And this is just from the New York Post. Elon Musk calls for regulations on artificial intelligence. This is back in 2020, and I mean, he's spoken about it many, many times. You could go on to read the article about it, and he calling for regulation on organizations developing advanced artificial intelligence, including his own companies. He's welcoming it in his own companies. Okay. Now, as a small business owner, you could take small, large, whatever business owners, I would guarantee you that nobody's going to Congress and saying, regulate me. Okay. Please regulate me. Nobody's wanting to do that. But he is. And why is he saying this needs to be regulated? Well,
I was unaware that he started OpenAI.
Yep.
Sorry to bring that up.
Yeah. He was one of the original founders of OpenAI. He sees the good that can be done with AI, but he also sees the evil that can be done and is currently being done. And we're going to start to go down the rabbit hole a little bit here. We're going to get into a little bit of the darker side of AI. I think that there's many, many good uses for AI, people. I think that people need to understand that. But, again, AI is a broad term. Yeah. When somebody says AI, say, what do you mean? Do you mean facial recognition software? Do you mean cancer diagnostic software? Do you mean vision systems and manufacturing? Are you talking about algorithms, search algorithms? What are you talking about? What specific use are you talking about for AI? Okay, because that's very, very important. Self-driving, whatever it is, because there are very, very, I would say probably some of the most powerful people on Earth, if not the most powerful people on Earth, that have harnessed AI to absolutely own everything. And now I sound like a conspiracy theorist. I'm not going off into conspiracy land with this. I'm not going to go, this person and is doing that, and they're eating babies and around a fire somewhere or whatever. In I don't know, Moloch, or I can't remember what it was. There was some owl thing or whatever. I don't know, Pizzagate or whatever. I don't know about all that. Oh man, I better not say that stuff. Yeah, YouTube's probably going to take my thing down. I'm not saying that, YouTube. I'm not saying that, okay? And the AI is going to kick me off. So, yes. But what I'm referring to is more specifically is BlackRock. And so BlackRock created a couple different things, or bought a couple different things. BlackRock uses something that's called Aladdin.
Okay, so what is BlackRock?
Okay.
For people that don't know.
For people that don't know, BlackRock is an investing firm. It's an asset management firm. That's what they do. They buy things. They buy things and they sell things. That's what they do. Assets of all kinds: stocks, bonds, land, businesses. BlackRock went around buying a lot of property in the United States and probably around the world. And why did they do this? Why did they go around and do these things? Because
to strengthen their portfolio.
That's right.
And how much was it the last time you saw? It was $9 trillion worth of assets they hold.
They hold more
It's
wealth.
probably more than that.
Banks are now beholden to them. To give you a little bit of an insight, okay? So, and we'll include some of these links there because I'm just going to briefly just show some of these things. I don't want to read the whole articles or anything like that, but BlackRock's Aladdin. Okay, what is Aladdin, right? Aladdin is
a Disney cartoon, I believe.
Yeah, besides, yeah, we're going to get a copyright strike, man.
I think you could talk about Disney, if I started singing a song from it.
So, it's BlackRock's Aladdin is basically it's trading software, it's asset management software. It's so much more than that. There's a lot of stuff in there. What it does is it takes a look at risk. And again, it's using an algorithm written by a human being. People, okay. There's people that give it its different variables, and they know that there's a certain risk percentage to buying a certain asset class, and they're it's constantly weighing risk versus reward in that given moment in time. So recently it bought up a whole bunch of land, right? A whole bunch of physical properties and stuff.
The AI did, or BlackRock?
BlackRock did. Okay.
Using their Aladdin software.
Yes. It said buy, they bought, right? So, and when you take a look at that and you see what it's doing is that what it's doing is it's taking all these different it's seeing that the countries around the world printed, ridiculous amounts of money. So what did it do? It fleed into asset classes that were, not completely fleed into, but fleed a lot of money, and it's got a ton of money. It fleed into these asset classes that are sort of their price is going to go up with inflation. So it safeguards that. And I wouldn't be surprised if later on it ends up selling off some of that stuff to buy something else that is going to be more profitable in the short term, if they even need to sell anything off at all. But the amount of money that is controlled by BlackRock due to the AI, due to this AI helping them identify these different asset classes and saying, oh, okay, this is a good buy and this is a bad buy. This is not something that you have access to. This isn't something that the little guy's got access to. All you've got is your wits. And, not $9 trillion either. So.
As far as high frequency trading on the stock market, common people don't have access to that. And high frequency trading is literally fractions of a second trading and buying and selling, and they don't get charged for it. Whereas the common man, what was that happened? Not that GameStop thing. When the little guy was finally getting ahead, that's kind of a difference. We weren't playing the game. I didn't play into that, but when they were able to push people out
the
GameStonks or whatever,
stuff like that. Yeah.
I don't want to get too deep in that. I'm sure y'all have heard of that, but this is a whole nother level on the other side. It's crashed the market. High frequency trading, and Aladdin definitely has its hooks in a lot of that.
Yep. And this is you gotta understand, this company owns the world. This company basically owns half the world now.
Yeah, high frequency trading is ridiculous. They basically just can sit there and siphon money out of the markets.
Yeah, and that's what they do. They siphon money. They siphon value out of real producers. And this is not real value.
And their AIs are able to look at in that fraction of a second, stuff that you wouldn't even ever have access to. Trading patterns and stuff.
I'm just gonna put it out there. Larry Fink, and I don't want to kill myself or anything, so just putting that out there. But I'm not gonna suicide myself. I think that Larry Fink is an evil human being. I think he is an evil human being. I think he is just not a good person. He may see himself as a good person. He may think himself as a good person. He's not. Larry Fink is the founder. He's the guy that runs the show there, and he's the guy that's pushed a lot of this stuff along. And when we talk about regulation, Elon Musk called for regulation. Here's my take on it. Okay, you need to know what's in your bread. You need to know what's in your food, right? because you can't just have anybody just serving whatever. It's not like dirt bread or whatever, right? You want there to be a regulation there saying you can't serve poison to people, right? And you also want there to be information given. My proposal to that would be is that you don't have to open up your code. You don't want competitors to steal your code and things like that. But you need to let people know that this is how you're being manipulated. This is how, like, you need to know the ingredient list. Okay? So, how does your algorithm work, right? And I think that there should be very, very heavy fines levied according to the size of the company, meaning that, because $10 million to Google, for example, and I'm not just trying to pick on Google, but Google, for example, $10 million to Google or whatever is nothing, right? So $10 million to me, obviously I can't pay that. There's no way. And, so the little companies and everything like that will never engage those kind of laws and those kind of regulations that say, okay, it's a $10 million fine when you cross this line. All of the little players, all of the little guys and everything won't cross that line, or maybe they will, but they're much bigger push to not do that. I do believe that fines against that should be levied against them based on the valuation of the company. I think it should be huge fines against it for manipulating people.
I feel like
against their will.
Being a horrible
I think it's immoral.
realist, I know how that would look. They would go before Congress and they'd say, well, we don't know what's going on in the AI in any given second, because that is true. Mm-hmm. But they definitely can shift their hand, and make it do one thing or another.
They write the algorithm. They make the manipulation. That's the whole thing. What people don't understand is that the AI executes the program that's written by somebody else. It's formed that way, and it's the point that I'm getting to here. So when you don't like a company, say you say something that is politically unpopular at the time, maybe you go and you try to buy Twitter because it's turned into a cesspool and you feel like you can do better with it, and you like free speech and everything, and all of a sudden you find yourself at the other end of other people's ire, and these other people control very, very powerful AIs that can crash the valuation of your company and crash the stock price of your company and chase investors away. And that's my next point here, is talking about ESG. Okay? So ESG, for those that are unfamiliar, is environmental, social, and governance score. It's a scoring that...
Well, that sounds like a pretty amazing thing. Who would have possibly came up with that? I mean, it sounds like... It sounds like something that people would want, your green thumb people.
But who came up with that ESG? Oh, look at that. Oh, look at that. From Bloomberg. Links included in the thing here. I think you guys might be able to at least trust Bloomberg to some degree, right? How BlackRock made ESG the hottest ticket on Wall Street. And then what happened to Musk? Was anybody paying attention to the whole ESG thing? The guy's his company got a lower ESG score than oil companies did. He was like lower middle of the pack of all the automotive companies. And I'm like, wait a minute. This is like the green dude, the guy that wants to transform the world into renewable energy and electric cars, right?
Yeah.
But he said some politically unpopular things with a certain group of very powerful people. And what happened to him? He got removed from the S&P 500's ESG index. Okay? He got kicked out. Right? So if you can control that amount of money, you can set the values that you want companies to extol. And I watched a really neat video on this not too long ago. You start to realize why all of these companies start to show certain types of shows and how they've just, they ruined everything. But how all these shows became ultra woke and all this stuff happened within them, and you're like, why are they shooting themselves in the foot? This stuff's not popular. People aren't really tuning into this for it. It might be your bag, but it's not mine. And
it's not my bag, baby.
It's not my bag, baby. And you realize suddenly, you're like, oh, ESG. Okay, I get it now. I get it. So basically,
Yeah, I guess I'm not seeing the connection between
what happens
woke
is
Hollywood and
well, what happened?
environmental.
These are publicly traded companies.
Yeah.
These are publicly traded companies. They have stock prices, and when you have somebody that owns half the wealth of the world and controls that and can destroy your company, kick you off of the S&P 500's ESG index for it, chase investors away. Yeah, these companies rely on investors to keep growing and keep moving. And that when I say investors, I'm not talking about just the big investors. I'm talking about all the combined investors, all the little guys too, in the 401ks and everything. That money, combines to make a lot more money, and it chases them away from things that you would normally be like, hey, like, wouldn't I want to buy that? Would I want to buy the most American-made car that has the highest profit margins in the world, that installs and actually lives by their values? They want to make a greener planet, whether you believe them, whether you believe in all that or not. It's kind of, I'm the guy that says, hey, if you stand by, your beliefs, and you practice what you preach and you follow through on that, you build a profitable company around that. I mean, I'm going to respect that, whether I agree with you completely or not on it. I'm going to say, hey, I got to respect that, right? I mean, you really put in the work, blood, sweat, and tears to make it happen, and yet you've got this outside force that can crash your stock, or at least bring the value down on it tremendously. That's creating and then making this whole ESG thing a thing, and then using Aladdin software, AI software to control and manipulate the market. And once you've got so much control of it, you might as well have all the control of it, because you can, you really don't need 100% to completely crash the price of something, right? When you control enough, you can really manipulate the price on things, different assets, and different prices of things, prices of commodities like oil and corn futures and things of that nature. So I know this seems like it's not.
Isn't it weird?
Like I think it is, but it really
when
is.
I stop to think of, like, anytime anything tries to take too much power, just like any system, like it catastrophically fails. Like,
it gets so corrupted.
Well, no, I'm talking the universe in general. Anything that like tries to like draw too much power,
too large, right?
Yeah, without a balance.
And this is where it goes back to some of the founding principles, is that our founding fathers, a lot of people don't realize this. I don't understand. Something happened between when I was younger and now, like on both political parties in the United States, is that they really, really warmed up to big business in such just strange ways. Well, I mean, it makes sense. It's money, right? A bunch of crooked politicians. But back then, there was a lot more antitrust, anti-monopoly type of things. And our founding fathers were anti-monopoly. And people were like, oh, what would they know? They don't, they didn't have big tech back then, and they couldn't have seen the future or whatever. No, they had the East India Trading Company. I think people need to do a little bit of reading of history and understand that they did have and they did understand the dangers of very, very large companies. You had privateers back then that owned armies, basically. They had ships and cannons, and they had all the greatest war-making technology at the time, and they were privately paid by different countries and stuff like that to wage war on their enemies. And you better pay your bill, because they'll turn around and wage war on you and take what they want. So you understand that they knew the danger of too big, too powerful, that it would threaten the freedoms of the individual. So I'm always pro, stripping giant monopolies. People are like, oh, that's kind of regulating. Doesn't sound like a very libertarian view. And I said, well, you gotta balance that with the evil that it creates. You take a look at these big old companies, and you're like, ooh. I'm not saying it's just because it's a big company. I'm saying because it's a big company and it's the only one, or it typically in the past we thought if you were at the 75% range, you were a monopoly. Then this is going back throughout history. in U.S. history. We thought 75%. If you got 75% of the market, you were a monopoly at that point.
Yeah.
Because you set the price, you could manipulate the market to the fullest extent.
Well, I don't know. Can you think of any system or anything in the past where something took 100% and it didn't fail? Like I can't think of any example.
No.
I can't think of any example in nature. That's what I'm talking about.
No,
I'm just
I
talking
think
about like power
individuals-
in general, like
Yeah.
in what we do. If something tries to sap 100% of the power, everything else is going to fail in the system.
Yep. Absolutely.
That's what I'm getting at. Like it's
I
not
think-
a sustainable thing ever. I can't think of any example in all of my thought, like experiments in my head that
I can't think of a time in history where the collection of power into a singular force ever led to good. That's the way that I look at it.
I mean, maybe it's an inevitability that the power accumulates in one area, but like it always fails. I mean, civilizations
Now
in
YouTube
the past,
YouTube may take this video down because I'm going straight at the throat of like BlackRock and stuff and these kind of things in the negative uses of AI and the manipulations that people are facing through AI. And there's a lot of nefarious things that can be done. I mean, they're gobbling up the world, right?
Yeah.
And
I mean, I think AI may be necessary for us to ever truly go into space, but
yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be a lot.
the
of
way we are as
conversations.
humans, I don't know we would ever get that far.
Yeah, but that's what I say. It's
Power
like
struggles,
it's like I can use a knife to cut bread, or I can use a knife to hurt somebody, right?
Yeah.
So I think AI is a tool.
Got it. It's
It's
a wonderful,
illegal.
beautiful,
Yeah,
powerful tool. But
It's illegal for me to stab Jeremiah with a knife, okay? It's not illegal for me to have a knife to cut bread, right? It's that simple, right? I don't think that AI in itself is evil. I think that how you use it, just like all of these other things. When we get...
I still hate the term AI because even
I
though
do too. It's
we
very
already said
generic.
that,
It's very generic. It's very, very
I kind of
generic
wish there was a
term.
better word for
Well, I mean, it's the common use now, you know.
stochastic, probabilistic
being
data
able to-
crunchers. How about that?
That's too wordy. Nobody wants to say that crap. But I think that the downsides of AI is not in the fact of its existence. It's in how it's used. How does it get used? How does it thing? And this is where when I'm gonna have to agree with Elon on this. And I didn't at first. I'm gonna say I at first I was like, whoa, because my knee jerk reaction usually when somebody says regulate, I'm like, excuse me, regulate. Good God Almighty, man, we got enough regulations. But in this case right here, I have to strongly agree with him, and I definitely, because I took some time to think about what he was saying, what he was referring to, what exactly what he was doing, and then I started looking at the downsides of AI because. Yeah, I mean, I work on machinery for a living and stuff. We make products, things that make people's lives better, feed people, medical stuff, all kinds of stuff. And it's not like we're using it for nefarious purposes. But when I see it being used like what they're doing, like what BlackRock's doing, I'm really concerned about it. I think that when you see giant companies, when I see Google manipulating people's perception, when I see people that are already have a lot of money and power using it to manipulate people and to get what they want out of it, I think it's immoral. I think it's dishonest. I feel like they're lying to people, and I really feel like it needs to be out there that, like, if I want to use this tool, you need to let me know what this tool does, right? You need to say, hey, there's AI doing this and this is how it's doing it. Like
I can in my mind envision a system that might work for everybody if everybody got behind it, but you'd have to like harden basically make it unchangeable after a point, these AIs for the betterment of mankind, like if we all agree on like the medical system, thing like we discussed, basically you can't change the variables after that, like basically maybe the code gets audited, every once in a while to make sure
that's not a bad
slipped
idea.
something in there.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
Because
I could see diagnostics being used like wholly and mostly for greatness, for great good.
But yeah, I have a hard time buying that they'll ever be able to like be transparent unless it's something along those lines. And I don't think that they ever have to open their code. Oh, got to open the code, got to free the code. That's just a ridiculous thought. But
yeah, but I do think that
maybe they could be like Vegas, Vegas locks down their code on their machines, and if you're caught, tweaking with it or abusing,
I do believe there should be illegal ingredients. If you want to think about it that way, I do believe that there should be illegal ingredients. Okay, illegal use and illegal ingredients in AI. Okay, I do believe that. I believe that manipulation, perception manipulation, because you're doing a grand experiment, like any medical professional. I hate to bring up the word Nazi, but this is what the Nazis did, is they did a bunch of experiments, and completely unethical experiments on people against their will and sometimes against their knowledge. And doing an experiment against a person's knowledge is manipulating them against their knowing is wholly immoral. And any doctor in like psychology and stuff will tell you don't do that. You're not allowed to do that.
Okay, so how does that tie into illegal ingredients in AI? I'm not
the manipulation. Like, so if you tell me, if I go into like a search thing and I type in, if I type in Trump something or Kamala Harris something or something like that, and I type in it, I want to know what they're doing, right? Is like how is that being manipulated, right? Because maybe I want it to manipulate it, maybe I want it to come out that way or whatever. I want to know that, hey, we weight this based on this point of view or this narrative or whatever. These are the sources that we're using to bring that to the top or whatever. Because what you'll notice is like right now the mainstream media is collapsing right now. I think we like anybody watching the numbers actually really realize that the mainstream media is absolutely just collapsing. Their numbers are collapsing, their narratives are collapsing, and I think a lot of it's because of fake news. But I think a lot of it has to do with they have released a lot of their own misinformation, not really corrected, not really self-reflected. They've attacked a lot of people just because of their political stance and whatnot. And I do believe a lot of it's collapsing on itself. And it's also low bandwidth, high cost. That's the other thing, too, is that it costs a lot to pay these people to put on this channel, and then it's just that for that time segment. Whereas when you have these independent operators like on YouTube and Rumble and different outlets out there where they can write their articles and stuff, it's a low cost, high bandwidth. I can reach a lot of people. It doesn't cost a whole lot to produce, versus say like a CNN or an MSNBS, and and you realize that like there's a competitor now in the marketplace for ideas and news that is competing at a pretty big advantage when it comes to cost. And businesses come down to costs and stuff, and potential profitability versus the old way of doing things. So it's coming down, right? But if you're gonna weight these old, like all of my results are CNN and Fox News and all these old players in it, and I'm like, look, I just want like an unbiased sort of opinion on this. It's very, very difficult to find an unbiased opinion on anything anymore.
So is that more what you're saying?
Yeah,
I'm still not following the
I want to know
ingredients.
I want to know what the political bent is in what I'm looking up, or are you trying to sell me more stuff or whatever, right? Hey, we weight this towards websites that have a product to sell.
Yeah.
Right. Which I do believe Google really does that, and I'm not saying that it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that because people a lot of times look stuff up online to find the thing that they're wanting to buy. So I mean, there's some sort of logic behind that. But tell me that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
Tell me that's what you're doing.
So how are you equating that to Nazi Germany? I guess I didn't follow you when you said that because
you're experimenting on people against their will.
Oh, you're saying that you don't want it to be be like Germany.
Yeah, that's what it's like right now.
I'm sorry, I completely misunderstood you.
Yeah, no, that's what it's like. They're experimenting on people against their will is what they're doing. Facebook's done it. They got in trouble for it actually. And what they're doing is they're manipulating people's emotional states by certain articles, rage bait type stuff, rage click stuff. This saw a really big rise, and you saw even in the mainstream stuff, they really caught on to that. This works. Getting people mad draws people in.
Yeah, I wonder how much, without getting too conspiratorial, and I really do want to do a episode on it, but I know it's something that, what was it called back in the 70s or 80s, the sub-masking of audio and, putting messages in. I don't know that I buy into that, but...
Playing the record backwards.
Yeah, I wonder how much
worship Satan or something.
Like optical and auditorial illusions and that,
that kind of manipulation.
AI would be able to figure out,
See,
what's effective or not,
There you go. And I think that...
Because I know y'all have seen that stupid, tan and white versus black and blue dress, or maybe some of the auditorial ones like Laurel and Yanni or whatever, where you're going to argue about what it says, but it clearly... I've heard, both of those and seen both of those, myself, and it just throws my mind because I can't choose which thing to see in a given moment, it just drives me nuts, and I wonder if
and the thing is, I saw both colors. I saw both colors.
Well, when I initially saw that dress, it was the white and tan to me, and it wasn't until I read what was going on with it, I saw it as the black and blue, and I have not been able to see it as the other way since, and that frightens me. Maybe they've figured out how to tap into something,
But in AI may get better at that and manipulating people's perceptions.
Yeah,
I know
where
that's a benign
you just
thing,
no matter how hard you try to break your brain out of it, you're not going to see something different.
You're just not going to see it any other way.
That frightens me, but like I said, I'm not going to dig into some conspiratorial thing. But I do kind of want to do an episode on audio and visual.
I can see that being used. I can see that being used for nefarious means, but. It's the whole idea that AI is a real broad term and stuff. My idea on it, if you're going to regulate this, and I do believe it should be regulated. I also believe that BlackRock should be broken up. But you just can't put that much power in one company's hands like that.
Well, they did break up. They have Blackstone as well, right? A whole bunch of subsidiaries.
We're not.
Google's
big.
not Google. It's Alphabet. It's Alphabet. It's his parent company.
Yeah. We'll just keep making it seem like we're not one giant glob of a company.
Maybe if you don't allow one part of the company to bail out the other part,
Yeah. You don't just shift funds from one to the other. But and I'm not a big obviously I'm not a big regulations guy by any means, but I do believe that we have to be very careful about AI, and I do believe that it should be regulated, and and it needs to be brought to heel. And I do believe that nobody should be subject to the use of AI without their permission and knowledge, explicitly. Hey, we use AI to do this thing. When you go to the doctor's office and hey, we use AI to help diagnose, and you're like, hey, all the medical journals say that it's actually more effective at diagnosing something earlier. I'm okay with that, right? I might be like, yes, I want you to use the AI. I also want to get the doctor's opinion.
Oh yeah.
But I do, and his treatment plan. But I
said, I would hope that doctors would use it as a tool and not let their ego get in the way.
Oh yeah, of course.
That's been one of my biggest frustrations even before.
NASCAR
better diagnostic tools is doctors is that their ego gets in the way. Well, I mean, they're similar to what we do. They just diagnose parts of the body and try to figure out what's going wrong.
You talk about ego getting in the way and stuff. So NASCAR was using AI. They probably still are now, but they were using AI, and the different pit crews were using AI to tell when to pit for tires and fuel and stuff. Yeah, so the AI was actually it was a really neat thing I watched on it, and the AI was actually better, but the guys that were really experienced, it was really hard for them to accept the use of it, and they did, and they finally admitted that it was actually better. I mean, these guys are good at what they do, guys.
Yeah.
I mean, they're like the cream of the crop as far as knowing when to pull a car in and
Yeah,
taking the things they can take care of. It was pretty interesting.
I think people's ego is part of like, or fear of the unknown is like the fear of AI.
But it's just a tool.
Like I said, we're not gonna have Skynet anytime soon.
No.
I can't say that it's entirely impossible, but probably not in our lifetime. But maybe that's why we start
if it is
building
within,
ethics around it.
If it is within our lifetime, I would just like to say, I welcome my robotic overlords.
Yes.
I can fix things. Electrical things. Automation. So, yeah, just in case. But yeah, I it's a tool. I think that just like anything else, you're a tool. You're a tool. I think it's just a another way of it's a hammer. You know what I mean? And you can use it for good or bad. And the term like we started, it's just so broad. It's so incredibly broad, and I'd like to help. Maybe this helps kind of inform people a little bit about what it is and what it isn't. And I know it seemed like we kind of went off on a side trail about BlackRock and stuff like that or whatever. But I wanted to kind of highlight like good and bad uses of it, and you can understand why. Like somebody that is actually using AI and creating AI, a business owner would go and say, "Hey, look, I can see the dangers of this. Please, this needs to be regulated in a responsible manner." And I actually tend to agree with them in that because it could a sufficiently intelligent AI, you could give it give it a couple $1,000,000 or whatever, and it probably wouldn't take too long before it owned the markets, right?
Doesn't it already though?
Pretty much does. I mean, yeah, it pretty much does. And I do believe that as time goes on, these problems and these really bad uses for it are probably going to be. We're going to probably see an uptick in them. I don't think you need to worry about. It's not a robot that's coming to take everything you own. It's some rich jerk that for some reason just wants to amass more power, because at this point in time it's not about the money. There's no way. I mean, if you had like all the money in the world or half of the money in the world, it's no longer about money. It's no longer about money. It's about power. It's about controlling other people, making them do your will. ESG is just a way of flexing your power on other companies, and you're using AI to get the advantage over other people and snatch up stuff that like families could be using, drive up the prices of housing and stuff. And
I wonder what BlackRock's ESG score is.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
They're probably on the top of the list,
I bet you they are.
I guess that's easy to say when all you do is shift, digits around.
Yeah. It's easy to sit there.
There's a whole lot of environmental impact into the server farms running AIs and that.
That's not where my mind is with any of stuff.
But
The way I look at it is they're just leeches on the system.
Yeah.
They don't produce anything. They don't grow any food. They don't make a product. They don't provide a service anybody needs.
That's not sustainable.
All they do is just milk off of the rest of us.
They better be able to make really good AIs, when everybody dies off, all the worker class.
Yeah. Starving us out.
Yeah.
But, well, now that we made it super, super dark, leave it on a nasty note like that.
I know. Are we ever going to have a happy episode? Let's all just, rainbows and kittens or something.
Yeah. But no, hey, look, there's a lot of funny stories about AI messing up and stuff like that that are upbeat. I think there's a lot of great uses for it. I do look forward to seeing those uses. I look forward to technology that helps make our lives better. I think that self-driving cars, I do believe that it'll lead to a lot less accidents, a lot less, fatalities behind the wheel of a car or stuff. So it'll be safer than a human driver because it can react quicker.
Again, people will need to set their egos aside.
Yeah, to let it go or whatever. Yeah. It's going to be tough for them, but Yeah, I do believe that there's going to be a lot of good. I think there's going to be a lot of good out of the stuff when used right and properly. But yeah, I hope I was clear about what it is that I'm looking for. I want to the regulations that I want to see is not like taxing them to death or whatever and telling them how they have to do everything in every single way or whatever. I think a truthfulness and a transparency is what's needed in these things. And then if somebody's going to be using AI to do amass wealth and things like that or whatever. Basically, there's like, hey, look, you can't own but so much. Just like any monopolistic practice, you just can't take control of that much. It's not tenable. So, with that, you got anything else to add to that, man?
No.
I hope you guys have a wonderful and beautiful weekend or weekday, whenever you're watching this. And you guys take it easy. Remember to like and subscribe. Please share. We're trying to grow this thing. We appreciate all the help we can get right now.
Give us some comments and tell us how we're wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
You can tell me how I'm right, but tell him how he's wrong.
Well, I'm never wrong. So, all right, everybody. You guys take it easy. Thank you, and have a wonderful.
And remember to always think for yourself, Internet.
Please.